I had the opportunity to go to Winston Churchill's house. And no, he wasn't home, so please stop writing me. I'm just kidding. I went to Winston Churchill's house. Danny and Sherry and myself, I think it was 3 years ago or so. And I love Winston Churchill. I really love civic leaders. Like, that's kind of my thing. I love Abraham Lincoln. I love Nelson Mandela, George Washington, all these guys in history that shifted the course of history. I love those kind of leaders. So I've read a lot about Churchill. So it was really, really, really intriguing to go to his house when you've read, when you've studied a guy's life. And then you have a tour guide that they take you through the house. And his house is kind of like, I'm just guessing, 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. But it began as a cabin, and like they added onto it. It's kind of a really big, really rustic home. And we get there, and I didn't understand what was going to happen to me. We get there, and we have to kind of wait for the tour. And so we get in there, and when we get in there, the tour guide is she's emphasizing the medals. There's this cases and cases, you can imagine, of gifts and medals that were given to Churchill, during and after the war. And so she was talking about the medals and the different things. And I kind of lost the tour track, and I was kind of wandering. You can probably guess this, right? I'm not too good at keeping rules anyway. Kathy gets so mad at me. So I was kind of wandering my own tour and kind of listening what she was saying. And we get to this room. We get to this office. It's pretty large office, and nothing in the house, by the way. But they sort of remodeled it, but they didn't like repaint it or change any of the carpet or any of the furniture. It was all original. And so I go in there, and I had read a lot about Churchill and studied some of his speeches especially that he made during the war. And she said, this is where Churchill wrote most of his speeches while they were dropping bombs on London. And there was a very worn carpet. And she said, Churchill would pace back and forth right here. And he would pray and write. And there was a desk, and it was pretty worn, with a place where you could see like he had his elbows on it, and his chair wore out a place in the carpet. And she's like, and this is where he would scribe his speeches. And I got so taken, I just began to imagine what it was like for a man to be under that much pressure and be trying to inspire hope for nations. And I wrote this. I went out and I quit the tour, and I was so overcome by this, I don't know what it was, like just kind of like grief and reality. And there was a bench right out front, the front door, and I sat out the bench, and I wrote this: most things are perfect and lifeless, mechanical plastic replicas of the real thing. Many people live a photoshopped life, flaws, frailties, and weaknesses masked by pretend smiles, carefully crafted words, and finely polished images. There is a certain inherent beauty in real life, worn patterns in wood floors that reveal pathways and passions, marks on thresholds marred by those whose lives toiled there. I visited Winston Churchill's home. It was a large rustic mansion with hand-hewed beams and plank floors. Many tourists were impressed by the trophies that filled the cabinets that hung in many of the rooms. Personally, I was drawn to the warm places in certain rooms where Churchill must have walked and knelt often. A discolored leather chair captured my attention, where Winston sat a lot. I imagined him seated there during those tough, war-torn days, contemplating and praying for wisdom, or pacing the floor in deep thought. A well-used desk stood proudly in the den that once served as the place Winston crafted many of his speeches. I was overwhelmed by the sense of nobility that filled that room. I loved that the house was lived in, imperfect, marred, scarred, and worn. There was intrinsic beauty about the old mansion, walls that told stories, floors that whispered secrets, antique furniture that begged to reveal mysteries. I sat on the bench outside his door for a long time, just reflecting on the revelation that was seeping into my soul by simply being in the same place that once was occupied by a broken but great man. I like my machines, my iPads and car and computer to be perfect, shiny, flawless. But the beauty of humanity lies in flaws, in frailties, and in weakness. Real might be rustic, but at least it's alive, not robotic, programmed, and predictable. I want to end with these thoughts. You know, we like to read business and leadership books here on our team, and we have one book we've read is the Strength Finders, which is a book that helps you to find your strengths. And you take a test after you read the book, and you find your 5 greatest strengths. And I love all those things, and I love the different kinds of tests that we take to kind of like uncover what you're good at. But lately and recently, I've been taken by the fact that God likes weakness. And that you could name all your strengths. If I said, who are you? And you said, I'm this and this and this. But if you didn't name your weaknesses, I'm not talking about your moral failures. I'm talking about the divinely placed frailties that God actually designed to be in you. That if you didn't mention your frailties and your weaknesses, you wouldn't be telling us who you are, because you are not just your strengths. You are your divinely placed weaknesses. Those weaknesses are like carvings in crystal. Like God put them there intentionally, because when you are weak, He is strong, and His strength is perfected in your weakness, not in your strength. And what I'm getting at is that this move of authenticity, God is saying, come out and be you. Not be you immoral, not be you liar, not be you adulterer. You're better than that. But come out and be fully alive, be fully authentic, because we love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be. And I want to just say that it's time for us to lead this move of authenticity, because God is doing something that's going to bring people into wholeness. Years ago, you may have heard this story. I wrote a couple of books that a university is using in their ministry track. And so the chancellor of that university said, I was with him, and he said, I'd like to give you a doctorate, an earned doctorate. I'm like, that's cool. He said, if you write a thesis and then you do these few things, we will graduate you with an earned doctorate, because we actually use your stuff. Anyway, and I'm like, okay, I had to actually Google thesis. I didn't know what it meant. I was Googling it while he was talking to me. I'm like, thesis. Oh, yeah. I thought like it's a theory. I have a theory. I don't believe in gravity. The world is flat. I'm like, I have to come up with some kind of theory, And I said to him, well, I wrote a book on, this is when I wrote the book on women, Fashion to Reign. I said, I just finished this book on women, and I did all this research. He goes, oh, that'd be great. We'll reformat it into the format we need, and that could be your thesis. I'm like, that's awesome. So anyway, long story short, I came home. I was so excited. Called my mother. She cried on the phone. Oh, you're finally going to be educated. You know how moms are. You'd be a drug addict, and your mother's like, oh, he's studying to be a pharmacist. I always believe in you. So anyway, Beth was my PA at the time, and I came home, and they gave me a counselor to help me with all the things I needed, because there was a number of things I had to gather for the graduation. So Beth was putting it all together and reformatting the stuff for me, and it's quite involved. It was several hours, and we probably got halfway into it. Maybe we were 2 months into it, and I went to bed one night, and before I fell asleep, the Lord said, hey, I heard you're getting a doctorate. I said, yeah. He said, you didn't ask me about that. I said, okay, can I get a doctorate? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, because if you have letters after your name, people think you can do this, and we both know you can't. And he said, you're a sign of what I can do with weakness. And if you go get letters after your name, people will think you actually can do this, and you know it's only me through you that can do this. So you'll ruin what I created you to be, and that is a broken person who I do a lot through. Can I ask you a question? When people call you an overachiever, is that a compliment? Anyway, okay. It's like when people say, oh, you lost weight. In other words, last time you saw me, you knew I was fat. You didn't say anything. Okay, here we go. I'll see how this works. Okay, don't even try to give me a compliment. I'll turn it around to not like you. Why don't you stand? I'd love to pray for you.